I had somebody ask me once, how did this change me spiritually? How did this change? It didn't change me at all spiritually. What it did was it gave me the confidence to know that I'm not alone, that I'm supported, like we all are. There's nothing special about me. We're all supported by our angels and our spirit realm, our spirit team. But it gave me the confidence not to worry about anybody else's judgment, approval, validation, and not to fear anything, not to fear whether I'm good enough, not to fear like whether I know enough, because God told me, and I'm a firm believer of this, that no matter what you read, no matter what you study, no matter what certificates or diplomas or degrees you get, nothing beats experience. Going through these spiritual experiences, nothing beats that. Steve, you've gone through it, and that's all that matters. So you have something to say, and you have something to teach. So it's lit the fire under me.
Welcome, everyone, to the Spiritual Forum. I'm so glad you're here. I just want to send a shout out to everybody who contributes in any way to this podcast. We are a donation-based podcast, and it is a ministry of hope, inspiration, and awakening. So thank you for all who feel like you've benefited and want to give back. I just also want to encourage you to engage in on the YouTube channel, and you can leave ratings and review on Apple Podcasts. Any way you want to engage. Love seeing the comments. I read them all. Sometimes I respond, and it's just really fun to get to know who's out there. So let me introduce you to my guest. His name is Steven La Russa. He's a master spiritual coach whose path has been shaped by profound transformational experiences, and we will be talking about those transformational experiences today. His journey includes a 2-year spiritual awakening, a dark night of the soul, and a shared near-death experience during which he encountered the voice of God, engaged in telepathic communication, and witnessed his wife speaking in unknown languages. Okay, so that's really unusual. We're going to hear a lot about this, Stephen. There's more to talk about you, but I want you to be able to tell your story. So welcome, Stephen. Glad you are here.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I I well, I appreciate you having me on, and my story starts kind of like a lot of people, pretty typical. Is that was working a 9 to 5, uh, doing what I had to do or what I thought I had to do to acquire success and status in the world, making a living for my family, for myself, trying to accumulate more. And for me, everything started and with crises. A lot of times people go through spiritual awakenings, not all the time, but most of the time it started by crises in life. And I had a lot hit me at one time. My wife and I were on the verge of divorce. I was invested in some commercial property that was not going good, was losing a lot of money on. My son was going through a tough time. I had lost a job that I had had for 3 years due to downsizing and whatnot. And everything kind of hit me at the same time. And all of those factors contributed to my spiritual awakening, and to basically where I am today, and to lead me to what I was called to do today, to help people that are going through or have gone through similar situations.
It does seem like most of us hit some sort of rock bottom before we kind of turn around and start looking at the light, or the light starts seeking us and we start following that path. It's not always that way, but it does seem that sometimes it really, really takes that experience where everything in my life isn't working and I've got to do something different.
Right. And I do believe, looking back on my life, I do believe there were probably some times that the spirit was trying to awaken me, but obviously like most of us, we need to hit rock bottom, as you said. We need to go through something severe to shake us out of the mental social constructs that we're stuck in, because they're so ingrained in us, they're so embedded in us. And we need that heavy spiritual shaking and shake up to really, one, to begin the process, which is to begin questioning everything. Why am I doing this? There has to be more. Am I really put on this earth to be alive 70, 80, 90 years or however long, to continuously strive for more? And it's funny because every time we get trying to fill these voids of happiness, and that's what a lot of it is, trying to fill these voids of happiness, it's never enough. We go through these stages of wanting, getting, and then wanting again. The house is never big enough. We need a bigger one. We need another car. We're satisfied temporarily, and we're always chasing. And then I just had a point where I had a good job. I worked for GM and Toyota. I worked for First American Title. I had good jobs, made good money, but we wanted more, wanted to accumulate more. So I started investing in commercial real estate and started chasing that and chasing that. And I just was like, I can't. I had a breakdown. I can't do this anymore. Everything fell apart at the same time.
So that breakdown, was that the beginning of the dark night?
That was the beginning of the spiritual awakening, which basically had me start to question everything. The purpose of life, why I'm here. There's got to be more to it. There's got to be more to killing myself, literally stressing myself out, chasing more money to accumulate more money, and to pass away anyway. And what's it all going to matter? What am I here for? This can't be it. I don't feel fulfilled. I don't feel satisfied. I don't feel like I'm doing what I'm meant to be doing. Although at the time I didn't know what that was. And it's like everything felt like a burden, like a pressure, nothing felt natural. Nothing felt, I didn't have any passion for anything. And all of that contributed to the breakdown where I started getting more spiritually, started searching, started researching NDEs, spiritual awakenings, trying to figure out what was going on with me because I went through a tough time of not knowing why I feel like this, not knowing where all these feelings are come from but that's part of the transition. That's part of the process.
I'm curious, did you have any religious background or grounding that you were coming from at that time?
I did. I was brought up in a typical Christian background, um, typical Christian family, typical Christian setting and teachings. And it's funny because when I was going through my dark night of the soul, and which a lot of your listeners probably know, which is that extreme battle between the ego self and your higher self, where you don't want to let go of the ego self. You don't want to let go of everything that you've been taught, everything that you learned, basically everything that you know to be, or that you think to be true, and that you think to be real, and that you think to be basically a part of who you are. It encompasses everything because so many people are caught up in who they think they are, not who they really are. So that was a point where I started having the breakdown. I didn't know if I was going crazy. I thought I was having a mental breakdown. I didn't know if it was a midlife crisis. I had the feeling where I wouldn't say suicidal, but I would say I was at the point where I didn't want to do this anymore. I didn't want to be here. I didn't feel like this was my home, like this was natural. I don't want to do this anymore. It's not necessarily that I wanted to kill myself or suicidal, but I, I can't do this anymore. You know what I mean? There's got to be a change. There's got to be more.
Yeah, I completely get that. Sometimes you just want to be beamed off the planet,
Yes, exactly.
like it's crazy here.
Exactly. It is. It is.
And I'm stuck. Okay, so you define the dark night of the soul as the ego and the wrestling the higher self.
Yes.
It reminds me of like the story of Jacob,
Yeah.
who wrestled with
Right.
the angel or the being or God
Yes.
or whatever that was,
Right.
and also Jesus. It's
Mhm.
Palm Sunday today when
Yes.
we're recording, and
Yes.
so we're going into Holy Week, and that
Mhm.
whole both the 40 days in the wilderness and also the
Yes.
Garden of Gethsemane were like wrestling with that
Right.
higher self and also wrestling with the lower self.
Yes. Yes. And it's a point. It's just simply a point of not wanting. It is funny, not wanting to let go of the only thing that you know, and the only programming and conditioning that the ego, that you're, like I said earlier, you're so embedded in it, you're so entrenched in it, that even though, and it's funny, even though nothing is working with it and nothing is going right, there's still a fight to hold on to something that you know that your soul is telling you that's not right and that's not meant for you. But the thing is, I think the problem with that is more so the fear of, if I let this go, what am I going to do? Because you know what I mean. That's where I was. I was like, okay, if I let all this go and stop doing all this, what do I do? I didn't have any direction. I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have a teacher. I didn't have anybody who went through it who could guide me. Because so we hold on to a lot of things that the universe is trying to close. And we literally, I said, we put our foot in the door. We have to learn to let the universe close those doors to allow the higher vibration to what's meant for our higher good and our higher purpose and passion to come in. And we don't want to close those doors a lot of times.
It's a strange thing we humans are. It's a strange thing we humans hold on to. It's like we'd rather live in hell because we know it.
Yep, exactly.
We know the patterns. We feel
Right.
comfortable here. We'd rather be animals in a zoo, or we'd
Hmm.
rather be captive in some way,
Well, yeah.
rather than open the doors and see what real freedom looks like.
Yep.
Um, I
Yep.
mean, spiritual freedom,
Right.
and it's everywhere, and it's kind of ingrained in our human nature. And sometimes I think that we're here to really be tested in that way,
Yeah.
like
Yep. I believe that. And
like.
we get, like you said, we get, it's weird because we get comfortable in it because that's all we know. And that's the thing. Even though it's not going well, even though deep down it doesn't resonate with us, even though it doesn't feel like our passion, it's all we know. And unfortunately, people have one of the things that blocks us, our spiritual growth, spiritual connection, obviously among many things, is fear. Is fear of not knowing what to do and where to go when we let go of something. And but to realize also, when those things are falling apart, the universe is and God is taking those things out of your life for a reason. And I tell my clients, when you to deal with that, I say be ready, especially when they're evolving and it's going to come. I said I warned them that this could come. I don't know how, I don't know when, don't know why. That's your personal journey, but beware that relationships will break down, old habits will break down, where you used to work, people used to talk to, music you used to listen to, whatever will break down. Don't fight it. Let those doors close. And I say be more excited about the doors that are going to open instead of mourning the doors that are closing.
I mean, certainly like the metaphor of the caterpillar, to have
Yes,
to give up my whole identity as a caterpillar and
right.
go into this unknown, chrysalis that you don't know what's going to happen there. And then you emerge as a butterfly. And I
Yes.
know that's kind of a worn out metaphor, but it is the awakening process.
Yeah,
We
it is.
we don't know what's on the other side, but it
No.
takes trust and it takes faith in walking that path and knowing that you're going to be led
Yes.
into a more vibrant open space for
Right.
you and your soul.
Right.
So should we talk about, so was your dark night of the soul, was that an incident, or was that like a period of time of your spiritual awakening?
That was a period of time during my spiritual awakening because
That's all that loss of,
yeah,
that
yeah.
metamorphosis, and yeah,
Right.
yeah.
That meant that part of that change. It was the intense part of the change because for me, and from what I understand from most people, everybody's experience is different and different levels of intensity and whatnot, and what sparks it and everything. But for me, and for most people, it's usually beginning with the questioning. Why am I doing this? There's got to be more. This doesn't feel right. The questioning, and then to start the searching, and then that feeling obviously starts to grow and grow and grow. Then you have the period where all those material things, 3D world, ego self, man-made ideals, logic, social mental constructs will start breaking down. But then well, like I said, we keep that fight to hold on to them, and we unknowingly create more suffering by holding on to what we think is comfortable, what we think we know, and out of fear. So that's what my dark night of the soul was trying to hold on to relationships, circumstances, things I used to do, and trying to fight it. Because in my mind, I have to get back to normal. That's what the logical mind tells you. I have to get back to my normal. But what the spirit is trying to tell you is no, you need to evolve into who you truly are, into your authentic self, and merge with your higher self. And that's why I feel like it's so important for me, you, and what we're doing to tell our story so the people that are going through this or have gone through it or whatnot can understand it and deal with it and navigate it a lot better.
Yeah, well, I think the Dark Knight is definitely part of the hero's journey. If you're, the hero's journey is, you start out at one level of consciousness, and you you enter into the unknown. You end up bringing guides to you, and then you
Hmm.
end up being in a cave, which is for just the unknown. Then you step out of that, and the whole time you're guided, but when you come back full circle, you're at a different level of consciousness.
Yes, you're a different higher level of consciousness. And you know, some people ask me, which I think it's an interesting question, but it's a valid question. How do I know if I'm going through a spiritual awakening? How do I know if I've gone through a spiritual awakening? And I said, you'll know if you go through a spiritual awakening, you'll know. And I'll give you some examples. You won't be able to. Some of the same people you hung out with, you're not gonna be able to hang out with anymore. The jobs that you did, you're not gonna be able to do or stomach anymore, or they're not gonna resonate with you. Places you used to go, music you used to listen to, you're gonna find yourself a need to declutter and let go of a lot of material things. You're gonna find a need for more solitude, for more quiet. There's a lot of things that they're gonna change. And I tell people that there's a difference. There's a difference between someone who's going through a spiritual awakening, dark night of the soul, and someone who's just feeling unfulfilled and seeking more and having and say, no, there's something more to this. That could be the start of it. But I said, you'll when you go through a true spiritual awakening, you can no longer do and conduct yourself in those old ways anymore. That's the biggest thing that's going to stick out to you. The things that you
Yeah.
used to do are not going to resonate.
Yeah, and like nobody really wants that.
No,
You know, on the other side is a lot of freedom, but nobody
yeah,
really wants that.
no, they don't. Nobody wants to give up.
They want
Give
the
up.
change without the change.
Yeah, they
You
they
know,
want the
you want
change.
all the good stuff.
Of
Yeah.
course, that's what I tell people. Everybody loves when the universe opens doors and opportunities. Oh my God, great, wonderful, and that's great. And they're receptive to it, and okay, oh great, this is great. But I said you have to be receptive and just as open to those closed doors, even more so, because the universe can't get you to the open doors to the people that resonate with you, the true job you're supposed to be in, to connect you with your passion and purpose. If you're still holding on to that old life, that old way of doing things, the old way of thinking, the old way of perceiving, all those things. So I tell people that it is the beginning of the purging process to better things, to your true, authentic self, to true connection, and start focusing more on what you stand to gain instead of mourning what you're losing.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Completely agree. Should we get into your NDE now? I do have a question about whether or not any of this questioning impacted the faith that your childhood faith and sometimes that changes when you have your near death experience, and I don't know if you want to address that now or as you go through your near death experience.
Well, I can I think I can definitely kind of address that a little bit now. For me, it did change me. It did have me realize some things, and like I said, it's not about, and I don't want everybody to take this, in context. It's not about bashing or knocking any religion or anything like
Mhm.
that. It's not about judgment and saying, pointing fingers, you're wrong, I'm right, or no, or vice versa, or anything like that. It's about what resonates and what you've gone through. So for me, I consider myself an omnist, somebody who finds truth in every religion. I do believe, I will say this, I do believe that some of the spiritual texts and teachings were not interpreted correctly, and I think there's two reasons for that. One is because they were interpreted correctly because people may have had ulterior motives. You know what I mean? When they were putting that together. Or two, it's very hard to understand spiritual concepts and spiritual events if you're not evolved spiritually. If you try to understand these events through a worldly, rational logic, you're going to get them wrong. You're not going to interpret them properly. So I feel like a lot of the texts were kind of interpreted wrong. Now, as far as Jesus, Yeshua, I love Jesus. I love his message. He is one of the most highly evolved souls that we know of in history. But I think that a lot of people got that wrong. I don't feel like he came to be worshiped. I feel like he came to open up our consciousness, to be an example of how to live, to be an example of how to connect, of how to evolve spiritually, to teach us that the kingdom of heaven is within. Luke 17:21, the kingdom of heaven is within. It's not up. You guys are looking up here and looking in the sky. It's within. Also, the other verse, and you probably know this verse better than I do, could do the verse, is that you could do all things that I do, even greater. So he was
It's a
telling
big message.
that he was telling the disciples and the people, you guys are in awe and worshiping in this and giving me all this praise, but you guys have this power also. But the problem is they weren't spiritually evolved to get that, and it was passed down as him being worshipped. And it's funny. It's funny. Here's a key. The people that really wanted worship, the Pharisees and everything, what did he do? He went in there. and told those guys basically in so many words, you guys are full of it. You guys are
You're
wanting that
phonies.
praise and worship. You're phony. You guys are wanting that praise and worship and that validation and money and this, that. And you guys aren't even teaching the people how to connect spiritually. So I think with Yeshua, a lot of people got it was misinterpreted throughout the years. And so, but as far as his teachings and being ascended master, I love it. And I consider myself an omnist because I've studied a lot of religions and I find a lot of truth in a lot of them. But I also find where a lot of things were misinterpreted. And I tell people this, I'll say this real quick. I've read things in my logical mind and being perceiving it through a worldly lens. Once you evolve spiritually and you go back and read the same thing, it doesn't read the same.
Hmm.
It's a totally different interpretation, and it makes a lot more sense. It's a lot more clear.
Yeah, I mean, there's a personal way to interpret the scripture
Hmm.
and a spiritual way to
Right.
interpret the scripture. Just like I always, when I was leading church, I would always tell my congregation that, there's two realities going on at any one time. There's the personal reality, which
Hmm.
is all entrapped in ego, and there's a
Yep.
spiritual reality.
That's right.
and and this one thing is happening, but there's really two realities. And depending upon where your consciousness is, you're either
Hmm.
interpreting it
Yep.
personally of the ego, or you're interpreting it spiritually. This is
Yep.
this is for me. This is for my good.
That's
And
right.
I've been thinking recently that the Bible starts with Genesis, which is the creation story,
Hmm.
and whether you believe it's literal or an allegory, it was the ideal state. It was like God created this ideal state, and it was an ideal state of peace and harmony, and we were all living with the animals, and
Hmm.
everybody was in harmony. And then there's the fallen state, and all of the rest of the stories is interpreted from a fallen state.
Right.
So how can it be like pure and true and light?
Right. Right. That's right. And like I said, when and you made the point, when you are looking at it through one of those two lenses, you you could decipher it better, and you can interpret it, and you could find what resonates with your soul, and you can decipher the truth and put it in its true context when you look at it through that spiritual lens. You know what I mean? Because a lot
Yeah.
of those stories, whether we think they're true or not, or they really happen or whatnot, I think people spend too much time on trying to label who God is, what story is true, what it really means. Let's simplify it. Take the good out of everything and apply it. Okay, take the good. Let's not overthink it. Let's not over rationalize it, because we create dissension, we create arguments, we create all this. Let's all agree on, treat your neighbor how you want to be treated. You
Yeah, the
know,
golden rule.
and the golden rule, and leave it at that. And take the message of Jesus and Moses and all the other ascended masters and apply it, and let that be a guide on how to live, how to connect, how to grow, and go from there. You know what I mean? And we complicate things. The
Yeah.
more spiritual I evolved, I got and grew and ascended, I realized how profound yet simple universe and God is at the same time, and how we complicate so many things with our interpretations and with our moral standards and what labeling right and wrong and how things happen. And it's really not as hard as we make it. It's really not.
Yeah, that's that tree of the knowledge of good and evil, that
Mm.
duality. And
The
now we're
duality.
stuck in this, and
Yeah, we're
and
stuck
we
in it
interpret the Bible through that lens as well.
through
In
that.
Unity, we interpret the Bible metaphysically, but I like to look at the stories as, who am I in the story?
Right.
How, because the stories that have been told for hundreds and hundreds and thousands of
Hmm.
years,
Hmm.
they've been told because there's a richness to it. The human
Yes.
condition
Right.
is that story. So
That's right.
I am all of these characters. I'm all these characters. So what can I learn from that? What can I learn about myself, and about most of those stories are about spiritual awakening, like the
Yep.
whole story of Moses and the wilderness and all of that. That's all about spiritual awakening.
those
But
those
we get
stories
really,
transcend time. A lot of people
yeah,
think
yeah,
that they can't learn anything from them, and it's a different time, and this is that. It's not a different time. Spirituality hasn't changed. The ego
right.
hasn't changed. The you know what I mean. That battle will never change. It will never change. The only thing changes now is we've got some technology and different music or whatnot. You know what I mean. But as
Yeah,
far as the spiritual
we have indoor
significance
plumbing.
and indoor plumbing, right? The far as the spiritual significance of the stories, they're never outdated. They're always going to apply, because spiritual principles how the ego operates is not going to change. It's going to remain the same. It's the same always. And it's going to be the same
Yeah, it's
battle.
we're playing the same record over and over again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, that was a fun conversation. Thanks for engaging with me on
Yes.
that.
Of
So now
course.
let's talk about the near-death experience. It was I know a little bit about it, and
Yeah.
it seems really unique. And so let's talk about that a little bit.
Yes, I'm gonna there's a lot leading up to it, but I'm gonna simplify it. I'm gonna just gonna leave the meat and potatoes and leave the appetizers and stuff out. There was a lot leading up to it, but basically, with the NDE, I'll set the stage real quick. Is that basically my wife was out of town visiting some family and friends in the Sacramento area. She called me. She was about to come back to Carson City where we reside, and no, I sensed something in her voice. I said, you know what? I had this thought come to my mind. It wasn't planned or anything. We know where that came from. Anyway, let's go to Tahoe. Let's go up there. Let's get a room. Let's sit on the beach. Let's let's rejuvenate spiritually. Let's recharge. All that. So she comes back. We go up there, and it's funny. On the way up there was something strange in the air. There was something. There was a weird feeling, and I wouldn't classify it as good or bad or anything like that. Just weird. So we go up there. I'm going to fast forward a little bit. We go up there. Uh, Settle in, get the room, whatnot. So the beginning of the NDE starts with me laying there on the bed. Now we're fully awake. We're not asleep. It's not the middle of the night. I think it was I think it was around 8 or 9 at night. We had the TV on, even whatnot. We're talking. all of a sudden, all of a sudden, I begin getting tingling, numbness, and pain in my left arm. So, like, now I've never had a heart attack before, but I'd read about the symptoms and it was on the left side. So, obviously, where the heart is, I was like, oh my goodness, is this a heart attack? The pain starts getting worse, starts increasing and increasing. The tingling, the numbness, the sharp shooting pain here in my neck, running down through my chest, only on the left side. My arm begins to do a little twitch, a little shake. So I looked to my wife, whose name is Wanda. I said, "Oh my God, I think I'm dying. I'm having a heart attack." So now this time, when you tell somebody you're dying or having a heart attack, my first thought or expectation was them to call 911, right? Okay, she's gonna call
Yes.
911, blah blah blah, and everything. And I actually waited to tell her for a while because I was hoping it would go away, but it was increasing. I didn't want to scare her, but I was like, okay, I got to tell her now. This is getting pretty serious. So she was standing by the bed, and she gets in the bed and she lays down on her back next to me, and she holds my hand. We're bent at the elbows like this on the bed, and we're cusped like this. So I'm thinking to myself, why is she not calling 911? Did she not hear what I'm saying? Now, now,
Have you
now,
updated your will
right,
recently?
right, exactly. Exactly. I'm like, okay, I guess, okay. Anyway, I don't understand this, but now afterwards, afterwards she did say that she heard a voice that told her to lie next to me and be calm, and to lie next to me, get in position and be calm. That's what was put on her. So later, we talked about that was definitely God, because nobody's calm in that situation when their spouse says they're about to die or they're dying. So she lays down next to me. So speeding it up, I begin to fade into blackness. I'm in blackness. The blackness transcends to space, being out in space amongst the stars. Now, during this time, I'm praying to God. I'm praying to God. Now, here's the interesting part. God opened up this communication, because now at this time I'm starting to shake and convulse. So I'm praying in my head. I'm not praying out loud. I'm praying in my mind. My wife said she began to feel my pain on the left side. She said it wasn't as severe as yours. It wasn't as severe as yours, but I could feel your pain. I felt my heart begin to hurt in my left side. So then she says, basically, what we found out is that during this NDE, we were communicating telepathically. She heard all my prayers to God. So I began praying to God. I heard God's voice 3 times during this NDE in my mind, telepathically. First time he said, "You've wasted enough time." And I felt so bad about that, and I should have gave that backstory real quick because it has a lot of meaning, significance to
Okay,
this
go
NDE.
ahead. Yeah.
So let me tell that real quick. Is that after my spiritual awakening in NDE, my spiritual awakening, dark night of the soul, I did a lot of studying. I got my certificates for being a master spiritual coach. This is what I want to do. I studied quantum physics, Dolores Cannon, Michael Wise, Michael Newton, a lot of read knowledge. I was told, okay, Steve, it's time to put yourself out there. Enough reading. It's time to get your website. It's time to do this. It's time to put yourself out there. That's when I began to stall. I began to stall. I began to revert back to my old self. I started having those negative thoughts, negative feelings. Am I going to be judged? What are people going to say? Do I know enough to do this? It's going to be too much work. I started to backtrack and I started to run. I started to get scared, have that fear come in. So basically, God, now going back to the NDE, just so now we have the backstory, this NDE was put on me as a wake up call. So back to the NDE, God's first message to me was, "You've wasted enough time." That's why that was said to me. That was the purpose of that. So I'm apologizing. Oh God, please, I'm sorry. I know my calling. I know I was chosen to do this. I know I agreed to do this before I reincarnated. All this stuff. I'm just praying. But now, as I'm praying, I'm steadily getting worse. As I'm going through space in the distance, I see this bright light in the distance that I'm steadily approaching. As I'm approaching it, I can feel my soul leaving my body, being pulled from my body. So now at this point, as I do this praying and everything, nothing's helping. I'm steadily going towards the light. So at this time, I said, okay, well, I'm gonna give up. I'm gonna give in. Obviously, it's my time. I'm gonna release it. I'm gonna stop fighting. As soon as I thought that, because my wife could hear everything. It's funny. She couldn't hear God speak to me because that was my personal message, but she can hear me, my prayers to God, and we can hear each other's thoughts. She said to me, Steve, fight, fight, fight. Keep fighting mentally, telepathically. So that gave me a second win. I started again, praying, everything. Nothing, but nothing. It's important to know nothing was helping at that time. I was steadily getting worse. So then, the second time, God said to me, "All this knowledge I've given you, and you knowing your purpose, and this is what you're doing with it. And let me tell you, all the times my wife has reprimanded me, it doesn't come close to hearing that from God, knowing that you've disappointed God, knowing what your calling is, and reverting and playing around, being scared. After you've been through a spiritual awakening in Dark Night of the Soul, it was like, Steve, you know what you're supposed to be doing. Come on now. Come on." And I felt so bad. So once again, apologizing. I know, God, please don't do this, God. Give me another chance. Now, it's important to know that I wasn't doing this because I was scared of death, because I know where I'm going and I understand the transition. I was doing this because I didn't want to leave without fulfilling my mission. That was the scary part to me. Not death, but not
I was
fulfilling that.
wondering. Okay, yeah. That was one of my questions. Yeah.
Yes, that was what it was. So praying, I'm calling on Jesus. I didn't see Jesus, anything like that. Um, Nothing like that. So I'm praying, and now I'm getting like I'm like right at the light now. I mean, I'm just guessing. I'm probably 95% there, and that's just a guess. And I'm like, I'm at the cusp of the light. So something came to me, and I said, Wanda, my wife, Wanda, please help me. At that time, oh, it's important to note, my wife said she heard the voice of God once, only once, that she had a message from God, and God said to her, "And why should I leave you here?" Because what we realized afterwards, she's a part of this also. Because she was away from me for a week and a half, and God could easily put this NDE on me while I was by myself. But it was like the universe purposely waited until we were together. And she said Jordan when he asked that question, which is our son. And she said that's the only voice I heard from God. That's the only thing God asked me. So now at this time, when I called on my wife, she sits up in bed and she begins speaking what we call light language in tongues, right? Now we've been together 25 years. I had only heard her speak in tongues maybe twice in 25 years. So I'm hearing this, but I'm still caught up in my fight. So I'm vaguely, you hear something, but you're not really listening. So at this time, I'm still praying. This is now the third time, last time God says something to me. He said to me, Stephen, be still and listen to your wife. Be quiet and listen to your wife. As he said that, a calmness came over me. I was able to focus. I looked over to her, and she starts talking in different languages, in other languages. She starts speaking, and she starts praying. I assume it was prayers in African language. And she starts chanting, and she goes from one African language to another. I could tell it's African language. I obviously don't know what she was saying exactly, but she was speaking fluently. Three different African languages in chants, and then she goes into an Indian language and starts speaking Indian fluently and chanting. Now, later on, I realized that God wanted me to be silent and be quiet to witness this. My interpretation of this was, I want you to know this is not a dream. You're not astral projecting. It's not a lucid dream. You're not imagining it. I want you to witness and be present to hear her speaking these other languages, so there could be no denying this event. So she does that. When she starts praying like that, and she starts interceding, that's what brought me back. Nothing else before that brought me back until she started her prayers in those other languages and chants. That's when I returned back to my body. I got up, started pacing the floor, as you can imagine. It's still, like I said, this just happened in October, so it's still pretty fresh and new for me. I look over at her, and she's got a daze. She's like with her eyes wide open, just in a daze, like you're asleep, but your eyes are open. So I didn't want to say anything to her. I didn't know what I didn't want to say anything to her. As she came out of it, we start talking, and she says, "I said, do you know what you just did? Do you realize what just happened? You just spoke in other languages." And at first, she didn't remember it. She was groggy. She couldn't remember it. So I'm hitting her with all this stuff, and I heard God. He said, "Steve, just be quiet for a second. Let me gather my thoughts." And then she starts coming back to her. I said, "Well, what did you say? What were you saying?" She said, "I have no idea. I don't speak those languages. I have no idea. I was taking control. The spirit had me." So that was basically, in a nutshell, our NDE. And after that, I got a bunch of downloads. My third eye, as we call it, our pineal gland, third eye, was throbbing, aching, and tingling for a good 2 weeks after this experience. And just a lot of synchronicities and messages and numbers and different patterns that have happened. The communication really, I had communication before then, but it really ramped up. So that was my NDE in a nutshell.
Stephen, that's crazy story.
Yeah, yeah,
It's so interesting. I had a couple of NDE people on my
yeah.
podcast, and I also had a fellow named Douglas Hodgson who
Mm,
he has researched and studied in depth at least 500
mm,
NDEs,
mm-hmm.
and this is very, very different than others that well, it's kind of similar to one of them that I had a
Mm.
guest on, who also kind of kicked her butt to get an action.
Right.
Um, but usually there's kind of the whole life review
Yeah.
and awakening to the interconnectedness of all life
Right.
and why we're here and all of that, and kind of being guided by spirit guides. And yours
Yep.
is more of of a a direct conversation with spirit, with God,
Yeah.
and and um and kind of getting an ass whooping a little bit.
Yeah. That's I. You know what I attribute it to? I attribute it to a father sending his son or daughter to the room after they did something bad, or didn't do what they were supposed to do, or whatever you want to call it. And the father comes in with a belt and give him a spanking, give him some tough love. You know that your father loves you, but you need this spanking. I felt like I had a spiritual spanking from God. And it's funny because and I don't people have taken this out of context, and I'm going to say this because I've said this in other places. During that experience, a lot of people, when they see the light and they encounter an NDE, they talk about the great love that they felt.
Hmm.
I felt
Hmm.
this immense
Hmm.
love and unconditional love, and it's indescribable. But I want to say this. Please don't take this out of context. I did experience that before, months earlier, where I had not an NDE, but an outer body experience where I saw the light and I felt the love, and I was on the floor in the fetal position in a ball, crying my eyes out from feeling this immense love, where it's so much that I had to ask God to ease back on it. I couldn't take it. It was putting so much on me. So I felt that love. So when I say this, I will say this: during this NDE, I didn't feel that love. Now I know God loves me and all that. So I had one woman make a comment. That's a shame he doesn't know God loves me. I know God loves me,
Well, love
but
comes in different
it comes in
different
different forms.
ways.
That's what I was
Yeah.
getting to. It comes in different forms. This was a form of love. You know what I mean? This
Yes.
was a form of you have a calling. You've been chosen. You have a purpose, and you need to get to it for the betterment of your soul, your mission, and to help bring the light and the vibration to the world, and not to just the world, to the universe, because it reverberates everywhere. So I was given this for that fact to get me back on track because I was starting to revert. And who knows, without this intervention from God, how far I would have reverted back.
Well, I'm also reminded of Jesus's healings, and my
Mm,
favorite one is at the Pool of Bethesda. And
mm,
I know there's lots of different ways to interpret this one, but
yes,
he first says, "Do you want to be healed?"
right.
And but then he's like, "Well, pick up your mat and walk." You know, he doesn't sit down and hold his hand and say, "Oh, I'm
Right.
so sorry this happened to you,
Exactly.
and I'm going to give you all this unconditional love." Something happened where he just kind of said, "Get up."
Right. Right.
You know, like,
Yeah.
"Get up, Bambi."
Right.
and
That's right.
you know, you respond to that. And sometimes that
Yes.
is what we need. Sometimes
That
we
is.
need that. Sometimes we need the comforting and the love
Right.
and the light and all of
Right.
that. And I do agree, love comes in lots of different forms.
It
This was just
does.
such an interesting experience.
Yeah.
Um, I'm really curious about your wife. I got a
Mm.
couple questions about that. One is I'm wondering, does she ever appear with you to talk about this? And then the other question I have is, what the heck do you think all of that language is? What was that about?
Well, first of all, she has gotten asked to appear a couple times. She she kind of feels like her theory is that she was a part of it, and she knows she has a hand in this raising the vibration and the light in this mission with me. But she kind of classifies it as me being chosen and her being called. You know what I mean? And she feels like she's there to support me. She's there to be with me, but she hasn't experienced the full-fledged spiritual awakening, dark night of the soul like I have. So she doesn't it's not as easy for her to talk about. It's harder for her to deal with. It was a lot easier for me to deal with because I went through those spiritual events and experiences first, where a lot of times, most of the time, and I know you could attribute to this and attest to this, is that NDEs usually, not all the time, but usually spark spiritual awakenings, right? It's
Mhm,
usually an
mhm,
NDE
mhm.
that sparks a spiritual awakening. Mine was, I had a spiritual awakening in Dark Night of the Soul before the NDE. Because a couple of people have asked me, well, wow, how could you talk about this so soon? It just happened in October. It's because I was already spiritually evolved. And now, maybe if I had the NDE first, I knew what it was about. It was easier for me to deal with. When God spoke to me, I knew what he was talking about. He was talking about the call. I wasn't confused. What does he mean? No, I know what I'm supposed to be doing. I wasn't doing it. So she's there with me. She's supportive, but for her, it was a little more difficult for her to deal with than me. You know what I mean? And now, as far as the light language, that she was speaking, I mean, to me, it was definitely it was definitely prayers. It was definitely light language prayers. It was definitely God gave her the ability and the capacity to speak in those other languages. And I find it really interesting that he told me to be quiet and focus and listen, because I want you to hear this. I want you to be a witness to this. You need to be a witness to this. I don't want you to think that. I want you to know it's real, because he knows how we are. Things happen and we try to, I was just dreaming and I was imagining it. No, you can't imagine her speaking in other languages. You can't. Maybe you could imagine a light, maybe you could imagine a feeling, but you cannot imagine someone speaking in three different languages fluently. You can't. So I felt that it was. I want you to know this is real. This is your wake up call, and you need to get to it.
So that's so interesting. I have to say that I've never personally understood speaking in tongues.
Right.
It's something that I've witnessed it once, and I was young, and at
Hmm.
my young age, I thought it was just one of the weirdest things that I'd ever
Right.
experienced. But and I know there's biblical stories, but I'm curious, how did you know they were three different languages versus just I mean, could you decipher the three different languages? Did you know anything about those languages? How did
I
you know they
I
were African?
I just knew they were African languages just from just from the accent, just from the words, from hearing people speaking African, throughout my life, or whatever, a movie, a TV show, a video, or an interview of
Okay.
somebody. So I could tell it was an African language by the cadence and by her accent. And it went into another African language. It had that same cadence and accent, and then it went into an Indian language. There was three different African languages, and then it went into an Indian language. Just like, you could tell the difference between someone speaking Italian and Spanish. You may not know what they're
Yeah.
saying, but you know the difference. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
So kind of
It's
kind
just
of
so
that sort of thing.
interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
it was just incredible, and it was just I don't want to. But put it this way: before my NDE had happened, I had watched a lot of NDEs. So what was amazing was I heard heard about people seeing the light, traveling through space, being amongst the stars, all that and everything. And the funniest thing about what amazed me most about this NDE is even what I went through. It was what is hearing her being able to have the ability to, one, speak in other languages, and two, is our ability to speak telepathically, to hear each other's thoughts. I mean, it's funny. I had somebody ask me once, "Well, do you think that voice that you heard was your higher self talking to you, maybe getting on you for not getting to your purpose and your path and your calling?" And I said, that was an interesting question. So I thought about it. I said, no, I don't, because one, my higher self by itself can't allow my wife to speak in other languages. One. Two, my wife also heard the voice. She actually heard it twice. She heard it once that told her to get in position and be calm and lay down when I told her I was dying. And two, the voice asked her, why should I leave you here? Basically, you're not, it almost like as if you're not fulfilling your purpose either, or you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. So that's why I don't believe it was my higher self just talking to me, because my wife heard the voice. Another thing, we were allowed to speak telepathically. My higher self by itself doesn't have that ability. That's from source. That's from God.
Okay. All right. Very, very interesting. This whole story kind of reminds me of, I keep bringing biblical references up, but it reminds me of
Yes.
Pentecost. It reminds me of, Jesus, the story of the resurrection, and then, the disciples are kind of doing their thing, and, they're probably sitting around going, what do we do with this? What do we do with this? I don't know.
Yeah.
Did that happen? They're probably
Right.
doing all that. And then at
Yeah.
some point, the Spirit comes upon them and they start speaking all these languages.
Right.
But something
That's right.
happened. Back when I was doing church, I would always talk about this. Like, I don't know what happened. I don't know if exactly what was said,
Mhm.
in the Bibles, in Acts, is what happened or not. But something happened, because
Yes.
they went from kind
That's
of
right.
not doing what they're supposed to do to now suddenly being
Hmm.
motivated
Right.
to bring
Right.
forth these teachings. And it's your story sounds similar to me. Like, you had this experience, but
Hmm.
you're not really putting it in place. You're kind of maybe even questioning some of it, maybe sliding back a little bit, and
Hmm.
then this experience of Spirit happens that kind of, gets you in gear,
Yeah.
and
That
and
that
now you have what you're going to have to go forward with whatever the message is.
yes, and it was, I it was it was an enlightening experience that I needed, and I understand why I needed it, and I'm grateful for it. But I'm going to be honest. For the first couple months, that's a heavy burden. That's
Hmm. Hmm.
I mean, I've never been through anything in my life. There's nothing more heavy.
Right,
There's nothing more
right,
heavy than
right.
that, to have God come upon you and give you a spiritual spanking and tell you you're not doing what you're supposed to do, and bringing you to the brink of death to get across to you. You better get on it. Or I felt like it was like, you know what? If you're not going to serve your purpose, it's time to come back with me, and you'll try in the next lifetime. I don't, you know what I mean? It's like, you better get,
Yeah.
this is your, so this is something where everything. I had somebody ask me once, how did this change me spiritually? How did this change? It didn't change me at all spiritually. What it did was, it gave me the confidence to know that I'm not alone, that I'm supported, like we all are. There's nothing special about me. We're all supported by our angels and our spirit realm, our spirit team. But it gave me the confidence not to worry about anybody else's judgment, approval, validation, and not to fear anything, not to fear whether I'm good enough, not to fear, like, whether I know enough, because God told me, and I'm a firm believer of this, that no matter what you read, no matter what you study, No matter what certificates or diplomas or degrees you get, nothing beats experience. Going through these spiritual experiences, nothing beats that. Steve, you've gone through it, and that's all that matters. So you have something to say, and you have something to teach. So it's lit the fire under me. That's how it's changed me.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so I have a couple questions. One is kind of a practical one, and that is,
Mm.
did you ever get your heart checked out and find out what
No,
actually happened there?
no.
Okay, all right.
You know what? I had my wife, my mother saying, well, you need to get checked out. You need to this, that. No, I don't. I said, no, this is a spiritual condition, not a medical condition. I'm not worried about it. I'm not
Okay.
worried about it. This is a spiritual condition. I don't need to waste my time or the doctor's time going to the doctor. I know exactly what it's about. I've never had that pain before. I've never had that pain since. I know what it's about. You know what I mean? So I'm not I'm not worried about it.
Yeah. I
No.
wouldn't, I don't know that I'd be worried about it, but I was wondering if they would be able to medically
See,
tell that you
medically
went
tell.
through that.
You know
Yeah.
what? I didn't even think about that. That's interesting. But I doubt that they would. I doubt that they would because I
Yeah.
feel like there is no medical condition. It was brought on by God.
Yeah, I get it. No, I
Yeah.
completely get it.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is the message then, Stephen? You've had this experience. Now, how are you taking that and going forth into the world? And what is the message we have for the world through you?
There's a few messages, but to sum it up, the message is that we're not alone. We're all supported. We're all guided. We all have angels. We all have spirit teams. We all have spirit guides. They're there when we're ready. When we're ready. When we do what we have to do to eliminate social mental constructs that keep us in fear, that keep us limited, where we open up, where we change our perspective, and that's the main thing. Change your perspective to a looking things through a spiritual lens, not a worldly, logical, egotistical lens, so that you can receive, so that you're in tune. To realize that we all have a part to play in this world, in this universe, to raise the light, the vibration. Now, your mission may not be as big as mine, or it may be bigger than mine, or maybe less. But whatever that is, that we could do to raise the light, to hold a door open for somebody, to smile at somebody, to listen to somebody who's got a concern, to take the time out to help somebody. Little things like that go a long way and reverberate throughout the universe in raising the light and raising the vibration. And also for people that are going through it, that are feeling unfulfilled, that there's something more. You're right. You're right about that. When doors are trying to be closed, let them close. Realize that you're not going crazy. There's nothing wrong with you. When you start to feel these things, it's a part of the process of you evolving to a new level. And like I said earlier, do not fear or dread what you're losing. Get excited about what you have to gain. That's the main thing.
Yeah, that's a great, great message. I'm curious if you personally believe that, because a lot of people think we're just here to learn lessons and to raise our consciousness and become closer to God. And then others believe that we are actually here. Part of our mission is to bring heaven to this plane, to Earth.
Right. I feel that it's both. I feel that it's both. It's raising the consciousness of Earth, the transition from 3D to 5D to the new Earth, right? To elevating the consciousness of the Earth to help with the shift. Being an empath, being a star seed, I realize that that's my mission is to help raise the vibration, but at the same time it's also to learn and experience and to bring these experiences back to source, so we keep evolving, so more universes are being made, we keep expanding, that the expansion continues, so that we elevate and we eventually go back to be with source. But along that way, along that ride, what are we doing for the betterment of the world and the universe, to rise, to have people ascend, to transition our world from 3D to 5D, to the new earth, to a new level of consciousness.
Okay, yeah. Well, before we close, let's talk about that, the 3D to 5D. What does that actually mean to you, and what do you think is actually happening?
Well, I see a lot. I see the shift going on. I can feel it. I can feel the shift, um, from 3D to 5D consciousness. And it's important to understand 3D and 5D is not a physical place. It's a state of consciousness. It's a state of being. It's a return to your authentic true self, to your higher self. It's the release of social and mental constructs, like I said earlier, religious dogma, limited thinking, fear, all the programming that keeps us trapped and keeps us from evolving, from ascending into our true nature, into our authentic self, learning our passion, learning our purpose, all those things. And just also equaling out the divine feminine and divine masculine energy also. You know, that this world is overrun with masculine energy, and I'm not even going to call it divine, because a lot of it is not divine
I
masculine.
was hoping you wouldn't.
No, it's not divine masculine. So that energy needs to be conformed and transmuted by the divine feminine. The divine feminine needs to get the masculine into being divine masculine, which it's not now. You know what I mean? It's about
Yes.
power, control, status, ruling, domination. That's not what
Yeah.
it's about. You know, it's about action. It's about being assertive. It's about being strong. It's about being powerful without overpowering people and inflicting, your will on people. There's a difference. So I'm seeing a lot of the divine feminine coming back and touching people. I've had people talk to spiritual leaders in Baha'i, even Christian, and they're saying they're seeing a lot of more people coming and questioning and looking and wanting to find answers. The gentleman that I know who's in Baha'i said he's been in Baha'i for 20 years. He said over the last 2 or 3 years, he's had more people come to him looking for fulfillment, looking for answers than he had in the last 20 years. He said something's going on. I said, yeah, there's a shift going on. Me myself, I, I for months I've been going through this. That I wake up every morning, 3, 4 in the morning. I can't sleep. I'm pacing the floor. I've got my Surfigio music on, and I start crying. I can feel it. As an empath, as you know, you feel everything. You take on everybody else's feelings, emotions, and I'm still working on my grounding to put up my barriers, protect myself. That's a different story. But yes, I'm excited about what's to come because I see a shift coming, and it feels good.
Well, thank you for explaining that, or at least sharing your interpretation of that, because those words are thrown out around a lot, 3D to 5D, and it's like,
Yeah,
what are you talking about? So I
right.
appreciate you. I appreciate you
Yes,
clarifying that. Okay, so we are coming up on the hour. So you've said a lot, and I really appreciate you sharing your story.
yes.
Is there anything else that you want to share with my audience today?
Well, in closing, I just like to say, to all those out there that are feeling there's more, that are having doubts about what they're doing, that are feeling lost, that are feeling they don't know their purpose, or or worse yet, feeling that they missed their purpose or that they missed their calling. Never feel that you've missed your purpose or calling, no matter how old you are. I've had clients come to me in their 60s or 70s and feel like they've missed their calling. And oh my gosh, I knew I was called to do that at 20. I say, don't worry about that, because one, either your calling is the same or the universe has adjusted that timeline. You always have a call. As long as you're here, you still have a purpose. You still have a calling. You still have a plan and purpose. Don't ever think you don't. So anybody that's going through a spiritual awakening, that's going through confusion, that's going through unfulfillment, that's wondering why I'm here, don't dread, don't despair. That's actually a good thing. That's the beginning of your ascension. And just find a spiritual mentor, a spiritual teacher, someone that you can trust that understands this process, whoever it is, whoever resonates with you. That's what's important. Whoever resonates with you, and get with them, and not as someone to tell you what to do or give you the answers, but someone who can guide you through the process, who can be there for support, who can explain things, but let you come into your own power, because we have the power to connect, to get our own answers. We never depend on anybody else to figure it out for us. But it's good to have someone there that understands, that's been through it, who can help you navigate through some of the harder things. So just take take faith in that, and leave with that, and do what you can to raise the light and vibration, because we all have a part, and that's one of our main missions is for being here.
That's a really, really great message. And I particularly appreciate your pointing to this complete fallacy that is rooted in the personal reality that there's some time frame that I missed. And it was
Right,
supposed to happen in my 20s or 30s. I missed that. So now I'm a
right.
deadbeat 60-year-old or 70-year-old or
Yeah,
80-year-old. And I'm going to just have to wait for the next cycle to come back again. It's something that our egos have messed with
right. You
even in the material world too, people think
yes.
that, well, if I wasn't successful in my 20s and 30s, I'm never going to be successful or 40s, whatever it is. People
Right.
start new things all the time,
They do.
and it
They
kind
do.
of takes it's how you're going to approach it. It's
Mm,
in your own consciousness how you're going
right.
to invite something new into your life.
Right. And the main thing about that is it starts with your perspective. If you don't change your perspective and believe and embrace the fact that you still have a path, you still have a purpose, there's still something for you meant for you to do because that's why you're still here. You have to
Yeah.
embrace that. And no matter what you think you may have missed or you think you may have done wrong, and that's another thing. We never do really do anything wrong. That's a moral standard that's placed on us by man's logic. There is no right or wrong. There is only lessons to be learned. And if you look at that way and you say, okay, when you look back at things, what lesson did I learn? What did I get from it? Not that it's a bad, horrible experience. I want to sweep it under the rug because it does no good for me because then you're destined to keep repeating that. You know what I mean? You want to get out of that. So realize that there's a lesson in everything. Look at everything as lessons. Don't look at yourself as making a mistake. And I blew it. And no, you didn't. You learned and you evolved. That's what you do. You learn from it. And you evolve and you realize what can I do differently? What can I do? And even if it's a pattern, especially people that are caught in a loop of going through the same things, why do I have the same man or get the same type of man? Why do I get the same type of woman? Why do I get the same
Why is
type
my
of job?
job a deadbeat
Why is it
job all the
why do I
time?
get these all right? Is or why do I keep going through this situation with this person or whatnot? It's because that lesson you haven't transcend. You haven't you keep reacting the same way to that
Yeah.
person, to that lesson, to that situation that doesn't work, reacting through a man-made lens. If you change your perspective to a spiritual lens, not being judgmental, not taking it personal, not taking on someone else's burdens, where someone else is spiritually and taking that personally. You have to change your total perspective in that to enhance your growth and your connection. Because as long as you hold on to all those things, I attribute it to Wi-Fi. I tell my son, it's kind of like buffering. A lot of people are spiritually buffering. We want to
Ooh.
try to we want to try to get that TV show or that music to play all the time, but a lot of people are only getting bits and pieces. And it's funny. I have clients to come to me and say, "I don't seem to be connecting. I don't seem to be connecting." Well, what are you doing? Well, I'm practicing yoga. I'm meditating. I'm earthing. I'm doing sound baths. I'm doing Reiki, which is all great. And I love great way to connect, walking through nature, all that stuff, being present. That's another big thing that we didn't get into, being present. But I say then when I start to dig deeper, well, you haven't forgiven your father for what he did to you, or you're holding a
Yeah.
grudge against your mother, or you're jealous of your best friend because they just got a car and your car is 10 years old, and you have all these hindering emotions and blocks that's blocking you, and yet you have an address that you sweep under the rug that you're not self-aware of, you're not acknowledging, you're not confronting, and then you go and do and meditate and wonder why you're not connecting.
Right, exactly. I mean, this is what I call the spiritual path is this real stuff. You
Yes,
know, the meditation's great, the yoga's
right,
great, you know, all of that is great, the crystals, whatever it is that you do. But
right.
if you're not doing the real stuff and
No,
get
it
you're
doesn't
not on the
matter.
path.
It doesn't matter how many crystals. And don't get me wrong, crystals, angel
No, I get
cards,
it. Yeah,
incense.
yeah.
That sets the tone and it sets the intention. That's great because you got to have that. But if you're not addressing those things that are
It's the
blocking and
life.
hindering the doing what we call the shadow work, right?
Yeah, yeah,
You hold on to these things. You look at somebody and you judge them and you cuss them out, and 10
yeah,
minutes later you're going to meditation class or yoga. It's not balancing out. Your motives and intentions are not connecting. It's like I say this. I give this analogy, and I know the analogy is in the Bible with old wine and new wine, and I kind of say it
yeah,
like this: when you bring your car in for an oil change, what the first thing they do is they drain the old oil. They don't keep the old oil in there and put new oil on top of the old oil. Same analogy. What a lot of people do is they say, okay, I want to be spiritual. They do all these things, but they don't address the old oil. You got to drain that old oil out first. You have to, because now,
Great analogy. Yeah.
because if you don't, you're going to continue to be spiritually buffered. You may get some bits and pieces here and there, a message here, a sign there, but you're not going to have a true connection
Your
until you deal with
your
that
car may
garbage.
work, but
It
not
work,
really well.
but not to the optimum level that you want it to
Right.
work.
Right,
No,
right. Yeah, that's
right.
a great analogy. Well,
Yes.
Stephen, thank you so much. Thanks for sharing your story
Yes.
and who you are and how you've evolved. And I think you're just a great message of hope, inspiration, awakening, which is what this
Oh,
podcast is all about. So
thank you.
thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Great, great. And everybody, thank you for joining us. I know you were blessed, and I now close the Spiritual Forum.